Warning, this podcast typically features spoilers and strong opinions. Proceed with caution.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Two Grooms, One Plot, the podcast where two lifelong storytellers who are married talk about stories. I'm Pavi Prachko, audiobook narrator, author, performer.
And I'm Colin Funk, child development expert and teaching artist.
And today we're going to be talking about episode 4 of Mary and George in our ongoing series.
This episode titled The Wolf and the Lamb.
All right, let's get into our switch hit synopsis.
Let's do it.
So, 1617. Until now, it's been 1616, I think. So we see time has gone by. And we see guys like digging up a grave and we don't know what it is. And it's like there's intrigue.
Like, what have we sent? What were we sent on? So it's like something freaky in a grave.
Yeah. And then we see the king bites George in bed.
George
and we're like, what the hell's happening?
Yep. And then John walks into a lake. And we're like,
it's like a really wild beginning. Like this episode is like real weird.
It's very tumultuous. For sure. And so they have this whole discourse about John.
Yeah.
Because he keeps walking into the lake and he doesn't swim. So it's like, is he trying to kill himself? And Mary's like, I think he's trying to swim to you.
But doesn't realize that that's just
it's
like
a lake and not an ocean.
Yeah. It's so weird. He's trying to go to France like you did.
Don't worry about John. Do.
Yes, do. It's so funny. Worry about John. Do. So we then we've got George getting bit by the king, which is like so weird, and he doesn't remember it. It's like, is he losing his mind or something?
Yeah.
And we're gonna see sprinkles of this through the whole episode. Sure. So we've got James talking about loyalty and shit, and because they've got this North American falcon or something. And they're trying to feed it, and of course whoever feeds it wins something, and Mary tries to do it
and does not work.
And doesn't do it, but Bacon does, and it's very symbolic.
He was chosen for
whatever
title. What title was he?
It's like this, I don't know, the steward, he's basically steward of the throne, while James goes to Edinburgh.
Yes, they're talking about a trip to Scotland
for the first time.
And taking George with him. That's the whole thing that's happening.
And why? Mysteriously, he says, duty. In
the meantime, Mary's like, okay, John is declining. We need to pick this up.
Yeah.
We need to get this shit tied down as soon as we can. So goes to Judge Guy and is like, hey, the husband can also make this decision.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, but she'd literally cut off my legs. I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
And she's like, well, if you do, then you're my family. And we're essentially the king's family now. And if we're all family, I'll raise you up with me.
And he's like, okay, fine.
So my wife will pay you for my ascension. And she's like, I love that part.
It's so funny.
Another time where she's like, clearly she's being honest about it.
I love that part.
I love that part. Your wife pays me.
Yes.
And then he's like, okay, sure, yeah.
And he signs his daughter away for this marriage. Well, they go get the daughter or try, and
Lady Hatton already.
She is back
She's
from
3
Italy.
steps
She really is.
She didn't leave. She didn't leave for Italy.
She actually didn't go. Yeah, because she found out from the page what was going on. She just has her hands
drunk and a blabbermouth.
Yeah, and it's like, oh, let's try to be as civilized as possible. Just tell us where she is. Oh, really do get fucked. She says, it's so good. Oh, really do get with a smile. It's so crazy. Oh, I love it. So Coke Girl's been disappeared, and they need to go find her.
Frances,
yes.
I was writing notes. I was like, Frances. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's Francis Bacon.
Yes,
Frances. So I'm going to call him Bacon.
Bacon.
And Frances.
The girl Frances.
Girl Frances.
And then, so then we meanwhile, we're
in
Edinburgh, and the king is like getting flirty with like the young.
Yeah, but he's also like,
there.
this is gonna be horrible. Scotland's terrible, and George is like,
They're
what are you talking about? It's beautiful.
It's like, no, you don't understand.
You don't get it. I know it, and you don't.
I've been here before.
And so they're like having this like weird like tension because George is like, it's fine, and he's like, trust me. Will you just trust me? But
also don't touch me and get away from me, and I'm going to flirt with this boy.
Just go over there. You're going to sit far away from me. And it's like flirting with some other guy. And George's like, that makes me sad. And some Scottish soldier.
Yeah, it was like the head of the security, Peter. And
don't call me Pete.
Oh, yes, right. He's Peter. And he's a Somerset. You find out he's
Carr.
He's
a Carr.
He's a Carr, but he's related to Somerset.
Yes, a cousin.
Yes. Worst Scottish accent I've heard.
Yeah,
I don't know if it's real. Maybe it is. Maybe that's what makes it so bad that it's like actually genuine, but it's like not great.
It's a weird accent.
It's like very weird
about it. But they start flirting, and and he's like, "Look, the king's gonna play. He knows that you're gonna play.
Yeah,
we're all friends here. I'm the king's soldier. You have to trust me with your life. It's fine." And they have a little
like, fuck
you and
every episode, guys.
Having a difficult time.
I'm a child.
These characters are having sex.
Yes, they have sex. They have sex in the alley, and James finds out, and he's mad about it.
And he's like,
"How dare you?"
You know, I had this old lover who was loyal to me, and he said I'd never find someone loyal again, and he was right.
Yeah.
Go find a bed. You're good at that.
Right. Meanwhile, Irish girl is like helping Mary and Mr. Coke find Francis, and she's like, okay, I found them in this house over here.
We got we gotta take her by force. And then he's like,
oh, please be posh about this.
Remind them that her father gets, and she's like,
I might be a bit more blunt than that, sir. It's so funny. It's like, I might be a bit more blunt. And so they go in and they
forcibly remove her.
Yes.
They break her arm.
Oh God, yeah.
And they kidnap her.
Yep.
And on their way out, or wherever they're on their way, they run into
Sir Francis Bacon.
Who care? Like, why does he care about this? Because he has this rivalry against
Mary
at this
and
point,
Hatton's
and now
like
Hatton and Bacon are
they're gonna be in cahoots a little bit
because. Yeah. Now that they're both kind of up against Mary, so Bacon is like, I don't think the king's gonna like that you guys are fighting over this girl. But maybe we can cut the baby in half.
Because he's like, I can't actually make a decision. The king has to make this decision. But in the meantime, they just like live in a house together, the three of them. Lady Hatton, Mary,
maybe I can be
and
more
Francis.
like King Solomon.
Like, like cut the baby in half.
In a matter of speaking.
And so they have co-custody, and the girl's like, can we please at least be nice to each other for just like a second? Because we could be here for a long time. So funny.
She's like, for months. And Mary's like, for years, if it has to be. And Hatton's like, just like clearly like.
It's like she like loses her cool finally.
Well, she's lost her cool a couple times.
Sure, but she's like outwardly, she's like, ugh.
Well, she's
demeanor.
I think she's like just like dawned on her just how much of a problem Mary's gonna be. It's finally sinking in.
Yes.
That like maybe I do not have control in the situation.
Yeah. So then the king is totally ignoring all this because he is like beside himself, losing his mind, right?
Yeah. We're like, what's going on? They go out. What are they hunting?
They're like hunting or something, and
they're out in the wilderness.
And he's like, "Where are my horses?
Where's my horses?
You're trying to kill me."
Over here. They're like, "No."
There were no horses.
And so he's like losing his mind and like paranoid, and it's like, "Who are you? Who are you?" I don't. But like they're essentially like, "Let's get him back. He's not having a good time."
Yeah.
And then Peter whisks
George to like this
old significant castle where King James was like imprisoned.
Yeah,
and
almost murdered and he
escaped. But he escaped. He was imprisoned there while his old lover Lennox was they sent him there and exiled Lennox while he was there because they didn't like him. The Scottish people did not like that Lennox was doing what Somerset was doing essentially, but in Scotland.
Right.
And the Scottish people were like, we don't like him. We got to get rid of him.
Right.
Just like people literally did the same thing to Somerset. The episode before.
Yes.
But
then he tries to
then he's like
murder George.
Because he's like, so if they find out that you died here, they'll know the significance of it.
Yeah. Because you killed my family.
And then Kit, George's
brother who came with him. Forgot to mention that he did come with to Edinburgh. He's there. Too. He happens to be there.
He also like has been like, don't trust that guy.
Yeah, he's been like, I don't like him.
And then shows up and just like
blows his brains out. Yeah,
shoots his head,
saves him.
Yeah,
and then meanwhile we've got John at home is like,
oh yeah, he cut the servant's face.
Slices the servant's face. So it's like, again, another instance.
Had like a panic attack.
And like
sliced
because he was being weird with the lake again, and the dad, what's his name? I don't remember. Locks him in his room, and then when they like opened the door, he was like, and like just took the knife off of his like dinner plate, and just like cut her, and like she lost an eye. Ugh. And they're just like making it harder to like get Frances to marry him.
Yeah.
Ugh.
And the Irish lady's like, it's like, I don't know, like we can't.
This is a little intense.
This is going to be terrible. I'm sorry that you'll have to cancel this wedding. And Mary's like, no.
We are not canceling.
That's not what's going to happen. She's like, why?
What do you mean?
It's like, it's fine.
It's all fine. And she's like, okay. Yeah. And so it's kind of like maybe seeing like cracks there, maybe
cracks
we'll see.
that relationship.
Which is like,
or like the kind of, it's goes either way, where like either she kind of like falls into the depths of that as well. If either they like are in cahoots like super deep and she gets super dark as well.
Yeah.
Or if there's
like, I don't think I like this. Right. Well, I don't know.
But then we see after then George and the king have a moment of like, what's going on? George's like, what's going on?
What the hell's going on? It's like, okay.
Like especially like after he's like, I just was almost killed by this guy.
Yeah.
And like, let's talk more about Lennox and what's going on there.
He's like, oh, this old lover, and he died, and then sent me his heart. And he literally sent his like mummified heart to him.
Like, it's a proof that he loved me. When he died, he sent me his heart.
And then you find out why they've gone to Edinburgh, just basically to like bury the heart
and bury it
in Edinburgh. I'm like, this is so dramatic. Oh my God. He is a drama queen. So they bury the heart, and then Bacon comes to talk to the king.
Yeah.
And he's like, you've been ignoring my letters. Is the king here, George? I gotta go talk to him. And it's like, oh,
I'm sure you just want to like get to the king so you can tell him the story about all this stuff from me. Like you want your thing to be first. And he's like, am I that transparent? He's like, yeah, but you're not the first one.
And he's like, what? And he walks into the tent,
and Mary's been there for hours.
Yeah, Mary's like, oh my God, you missed the story. Oh, did you hear that Kit's a hero now?
And also has a title now.
Mm-hmm.
We also find out like very sneaky, like what George's title is in the beginning. They're like, oh yes, we've heard tales of the blah of blah.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, you've heard of me. It dawned on me. I was like,
that's
they
a
just
title.
dropped that he has a title.
He's a title. Yeah.
And then they gave Kit a title because he's a hero.
He's a hero.
Saving George.
For saving George, yes.
And essentially we're like, sorry, Frances. Sorry, Bacon. You are you're too late, and now the king's on our side, and we go right to Frances and John's
wedding.
Marriage.
They get married, wedded. That's gross. And it's just like, I love that the church is like it's like the one side. It's like John's family. It's like not full, but it's like a bunch of people, and then it's just Mr. Coke on the other side. Pity Lady Hatton couldn't make it. She did pay for all this.
You're a little gracious in your win. I am.
I love to, like, she's like, oh, my boys, I'm so proud of them. What could possibly stop us now?
Oh, yes.
I was like, spoke too soon. But we'll get there.
Will we?
Sure.
What could stop them now?
That's my point. Intrigue.
He spoke too soon. We don't know that she spoke too soon.
I know, but I'm curious.
But you said she did speak too soon.
It's like, maybe. Like, I guess what I mean is don't jinx it. She's jinxing herself is what I mean. I don't know. Yeah. So what did we think
of
this episode? Generally, I am a little bit weirded out by like the crazy James thing. And I'm wondering if that's going to be part of the plot, because it's like he bit him and didn't know, and then he's like having this hallucination, and I'm like,
it
what?
has to be part of it. It's just like, it's got to be just like early signs of some sort of
like dementia
something.
or
and I
syphilis.
bet the king had something, you know, like
He probably did. Yeah.
You know, he's had so much sex with so many people.
And the new world is open, so they like pass in
Anal
their
sex is so much more likely to pass on
yes
sexually transmitted diseases. They had no protection.
Syphilis came from the Americas.
Okay, good. What?
The Americas were open, so that it was getting passed around. That's all. Well, because then he might have syphilis.
We know that from the first episode, when the husband dies of syphilis.
He died of syphilis?
Wasn't he syphilitic? Wasn't that the whole point?
Maybe. I don't remember. Yeah, I guess so.
I thought the first episode.
Yeah,
that's
you're probably
his,
right. Yeah, I think you're probably right.
I thought
he was syphilitic. Yeah,
I thought that was what.
Yeah,
it was.
that was the whole thing. Yeah.
I'm so like,
could
yes,
be.
we know.
Could
that.
be. Yeah. Yeah.
So it could be syphilis.
Could be syphilis. Losing his mind. But there's something. It just like it feels so like okay, something's.
But it's one of those moments. It's like one of those things I thought about that I'm like, yeah, it feels kind of convenient and kind of like an easy trope, but like also like if that's what happened,
then that's what happened, right?
And people do act just like completely weird out of nowhere when they have those sorts of disorders.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it feels crazy, and I mean like that's why we're talking about like witchcraft and things like that happen more often. And
he was just lovesick. That's what it was. He was just beside himself because he got this heart. He had to go bury it.
So it feels maybe to them like not signs of those things.
Yeah.
But like watching it, maybe it's just like triggering our own.
Yeah, it's a romance, but in our minds we're like mental health. Something's wrong. Something's wrong. When they're like, I was just overcome by my love sickness.
Which I don't think is what's happening. I think it's just we're just seeing early signs of something that's
kind of
going
decline.
To be, yeah.
Okay. That's what I imagine as well.
Yeah. I think especially with the Francis and John storyline and how that like escalates. Because I was not expecting by the end of the episode that they would get married.
No, me neither. Yeah.
I was like, oh my gosh. This is like, again, I guess more passage of time, like we were talking about last episode, where we are zooming.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because like these are the important pieces.
Right.
And the story is here. It's not
in the intermediate time. Yeah.
Right. We're seeing like you kind of alluded to this 3D chess game.
Yeah.
Where we're like we're seeing the pieces of the growth of this family and how it's coming to be. It's not about the relationship between the king and George.
Right.
That's just part of the story.
Right. Yeah.
It's not about this. It's not about this. It's not about this. We're looking at the kind of this puzzle piece, this game, this ascension,
this whole network and how kind of the network itself changes as opposed to just like the people.
I guess it feels like really streamlined storytelling.
Yeah.
In a way that I feel like especially historical dramas sometimes feel a little bit more romanticized and stretched out, and they're they kind of really filling in so many details, and I'm like, but we don't know. Yeah, we don't know all of this. Yes, we are extrapolating on. We
do need to extrapolate some things,
but some of these details, and we want to see the relationships, and we can't actually know the itty gritty, the nitty gritty details of the interpersonal relationships.
Right.
We cannot.
Right.
Only pieces that we can find in like love letters and shit like that. But like in terms of like actually knowing what's said behind closed doors, we can't know.
We can't possibly know.
So there is going to be stuff made up, but when it happens for so long and when there's like full plot lines and storylines that we're like,
what is that?
Why?
Yeah.
There's no evidence that happened. And that's a big part of this story because you wanted it to be more like blah in your storytelling. So like, I think if we are kind of focusing, like really storifying historical events, there is usually the tendency to want to like over fictionalize. And I like that this doesn't feel like we're living in so much of the in between over fictionalized stuff.
Right. Well, it's like, as you said, where it's like since we know kind of the points that did happen, we can look at, that's how we can generate what we would extrapolate, right? So it's like, well, we know that this trip happened, or we know that John marries Frances, right? We know that happened.
Right.
So we need to figure out how we get there. And so we need to figure out how they found Frances. And because there's probably a conversation between Coke and Mary to get this signature because we have a contract.
Right.
We have like all these records, or these things have to happen in order to make that last piece happen, but we don't need anything else. Anything else is extra.
Right. Right. And I think they are smart about keeping those connective pieces minimal.
Yeah. I think it's a good lesson for like any storytelling, even something that you've made up, where it's like, you really don't need just in case information. What do you need to know in order to get to the end point?
We don't need, if we don't need the information, we don't need it.
Yeah.
There's color, and there's color in this. There's color in the world.
Of course.
But it can be color that means something.
Yeah. There's a reason that exists.
There's so much history. There's so many pieces of this story that we want to know.
Yeah. Well, and so much of like that color is what determines some of the behaviors, where it's like, well, this is how people behave in court or around court, and that's why they did the thing. You don't need to like make some conversation to like, oh, we're going to have a kingly conversation. It's like, no, well, he's a king, so he behaves like a king, and that's why he did the things that he did. Right. Not this is how he talks to people. It's just, yeah. Well,
he talks to people so we could see him talking when he's talking to people, and it's important to the story. You know what I mean?
Right,
like, we don't need to add.
We don't need to like make it happen. Right.
Yeah, I think
I'm really liking the pace a lot. It's like really quick. I am actually surprised it's only been 4 episodes. I feel like a lot has happened.
Yeah, that's true.
And it always feels simultaneously longer and shorter than I'm expecting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Shall we move on to superlatives?
Colton, do
we have a time?
Time? Because the timer.
No.
You guys are at 23 minutes right
now.
Okay.
Yeah.
I feel like we didn't really talk very much about this episode yet.
Really?
Talk a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, what did we talk about? You said, do we like it? And you started talking about that thing. About how you're like, the weird king stuff.
Oh, the weird king stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
And then we just like talked about like the timing from there. Like, I don't think we've talked about much more than that.
It feels very much like a kind of a fun and games situation where we're like actually seeing people going after the things that they want. So whereas up until now it's been like, okay, we're going to like set up our alliances. We're going to set up our wants and needs.
Yeah.
Now we're like going for it.
I guess. I mean, like, I feel like Mary is always trying. It's just like,
of course,
there's always like very strong attempts made.
Yeah.
To like, because Mary's not waiting.
No.
There's not a lot of like planning and plotting, and it's just like, we're doing it.
Yeah.
This is what's happening.
Right. But I guess that's what I mean. It's like we're in a point where it's like where we didn't really like set up any more alliances here,
Sure.
right? We didn't.
Sure.
We did find
There's no new conflicts, I
right.
guess. There's, I mean, like with the king's old lover and just like his own.
that whole thing. But that's more of like an obstacle to like keeping that relationship.
Sure.
And then we've got, Mary is leveraging her situation that has been set up before now into this thing. It just feels very mid-stride. We're in the middle of this story.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I think they're doing a good job of storytelling and keeping it interesting and feeling like I'm learning what's going on without being like, I don't care about that.
Yeah.
Like stuff is moving. I don't know. I like it when it feels like it's nice that it's a historical fiction, but like it's based on history. So we know what we need to get to. Mm-hmm. We know some like stopping points. We know some of the actual markers of the things that happen, and we can just move through them. We don't need to like worry about like, oh, but what should we add here? Like, should there be a moment like there wasn't a moment like that. Yeah. We need to like kind of like set it up, but life happens. We see these things. We documented it in a way that's going to reflect that because that's how human brains work.
Right.
So we don't have to do as much work as we think to storify history.
Right.
Just the whole, I don't know. I like it. I
do too.
I don't have a lot to.
Yeah. I'm excited to see more.
Yeah. All right, we can get to.
Yeah, let's do superlatives. Oscar moment.
Oscar moment.
I mean, really do get fucked. That's mine. Oh my God.
I keep being like, is Lady Hatton going to be my Oscar
Lady
moment?
Hatton's the Oscar moment like every time. It's
She's
really good.
Oh, good.
It's real good.
She's so good.
Wow.
Yeah, really do get fucked. That's
really do
excellent.
get fucked. And
I mean, I just like that, the dawning. I think I'm actually going to give it to that daughter's line. Like, again, it's another moment where it's not like even Francis, who has been like Mary's like, this is for the good. This is going to be for good. And Francis is like, well, not mine, right?
Yeah.
Like she knows what's going on. Even though she's like not happy about the situation, she's able to be like, when her mom is just being like the bitch that she is.
Yeah.
And says that line. It says, can we be a little bit more civil? We might be spending a lot of time together.
Yeah.
Where she's not even like afraid of her mother. She's not a damsel in distress.
Right. Yeah.
They even gave her autonomy and power in and of herself. Like she's stuck with her fate.
Yeah.
Like, there's nothing.
She is literally a pawn and getting like traded as a piece property.
But she's not sitting there and like just like either like sitting there taking it, or she's not just like jumping on her mother's bandwagon. Like she's not just like falling into that trap.
Yeah.
She's her own person with her own like thoughts and feelings, and she's like, let's just be nice, and like tells it to her mother.
Yeah.
And isn't like, again, like I thought that was very fascinating.
It's really interesting.
It's like just a smart enough moment where again they just like throw these touches in where they're like, remember women were just like people what crazy.
What? Who would have thought?
I think they're very smart about it in this series.
Yeah.
I'm just like shocked at like every episode being like, oh yeah, that's different than what I thought it would be.
Yeah.
Just a little bit.
Interesting.
Let's be civil.
Let's be civil. It might be a long time. Years even. Unearned moment.
Maybe the weird at one point when George is telling Mary that the king bit him, he's like so like he's like a wolf, because like make that wolf and lamb imagery, and it's like more like a terrier, like a little dog, and the king's like, who's like a terrier? And Mary's like, me.
Oh, yeah.
And then she starts barking.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
It's so awkward. Yeah. Yeah, what a weird moment.
it is a weird moment. And then the king is pretty weird there. And he licks George.
Oh, yeah.
It's like a little bit like the first part of I think it's
That whole first part of the episode is so strange.
it's so strange. And that the barking, I think really, I was like,
The tone shifts.
what?
So weird.
What is happening?
Yeah.
That was strange for me.
Okay.
It didn't do anything for me.
Yeah.
Except we're just watching Julianne Moore
Bark like a terrier. Who's like a terrier?
Me. Bark, 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 bark. You're like, oh no. You are committed to this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll go with that.
Okay. I think I have to give it to Peter.
What about Peter?
I just didn't like him. His accent was bad.
Yeah, his accent.
It's just so weird, and it's just also like the actor is an actor of color, and it just was like it either was like out of place or like, wait, is he deliberately someone? It just was so strange the way that played out. It looked like it was on purpose or on accident, and I just couldn't tell which it was.
Yeah.
Because they seem to be doing more colorblind casting.
Yeah.
Generally.
Yeah. The lawyer was like Indian or something.
Yeah, right. And there might have been, but it's just like, how does this reflect in history?
And I'm wondering if it's one of those things where it's like, actually, there was more people of color around in these areas than we
would have
realize.
thought, perhaps. But then when his accent was
obviously like there was an exchange of like the colonized places that like some people came back to the UK.
Right.
Like it's possible that like
in Scotland
India was a colony,
right?
So that,
and in Scotland, suddenly someone is there from Northern Africa or wherever. And if it was like, his name is Carr and he's a Somerset, and it's like
he's related, supposed to be cousins.
He's related with him,
very,
and
very
his accent,
man,
right? And his
who doesn't have the same accent as him,
right?
Very different accents.
Very different. And I was like, wait, is he supposed to be from somewhere else? Because if he just had like a straight up Scottish accent, I would have bought it.
Right.
But then it was like, wait, is he?
Because he's like a person of color and has a different accent. It's just
and
like,
supposed to be blood related.
Right.
It just was like didn't follow.
Am I just, as someone watching a story, you're asking those questions like,
yeah,
am I picking up on clues that they're not who they say
exactly?
they are?
Yes.
And it's okay if it's like,
oh no,
they're not doing they just cast a person of color in that role. Like that's obviously not a problem.
Right.
But like, there are situations in which all of those factors.
I'm suddenly
going
to be asking questions, right?
Yes.
And unless I have like a definitive answer, I'm like, wait, was I supposed to get something from that? Was I supposed to assume something?
And I don't think so.
In the end, I don't think so. Yeah. Like by the end, I was like, oh, he's just has a different accent or something. I don't know if he's actually Scottish or what.
But it's like, that's the problem with color blind. We have to be color conscious. Like we have to know what
right.
We have to be intentional. We have to know what it's going to mean if we cast someone of color.
Right. Yeah.
That's the only way to be respectful.
Generally speaking.
Yeah. Like we can't ignore, we can't be like, I don't see color, because we do.
Right. Yeah. So that's my unearned. It's just
that character.
That accent, and just generally the casting, especially at first when I was like, it was very jarring. Later on, it was, it's like once I'm in the story, it's fine. But it's like when he gets introduced, I'm like, who is this? That was very confusing. Intrigue. What are we most excited to see?
Ooh, I guess like I'm not excited to see it, but I'm really the marriage between John and Frances. I'm just really I'm concerned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I feel like the other shoe is going to drop in a real big scary way.
It's going to be not great.
And I'm like, that is what I'm like, I think because it ended on the wedding, I am like really dreading what happens with the marriage. And so it's like I am like, that is what I'm most intrigued by, not necessarily in a positive way.
Yeah.
So that's mine.
I think I am, I find myself thinking about Charles, James's son, Charles the First. He wasn't in this episode at all. And that got me curious about if he's going to have a bigger role as like the next in line for the
time
crown.
Is moving, I would think so.
Yeah, because we've seen him a few times and he hasn't said anything. I just wonder if he has a role.
Small man in the hunt, right?
Yeah, I wonder if he's going to have some kind of role as, like, does he have a say? Like, is he in court ever? And it was a question that came up when I was just thinking about, like, if James is like getting sick, he's next in line. Like, what does that mean? What does that look like?
Well, maybe we'll see.
Yeah.
That is intriguing.
That's what I'm intrigued by.
Even though it's nothing to do with this episode.
No, I mean, his absence was glaring to me.
Okay.
Especially because he wasn't chosen as an adult, it seems, to be like the person in charge of the kingdom. He gave it to Francis.
Yeah,
Bacon.
but
I mean, who is a statesman, but like, I was like, well, the next in line for the throne is there.
But is that common? I don't know what the custom is. So
I have no
like,
idea.
I'm not gonna.
I don't know. And he didn't go with him. So it was like, he's just like.
So maybe we'll find out more. We'll see.
Okay.
Right.
Well, that does it for episode 4, The Wolf and the Lamb. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode in this special series of Two Grooms, One Plot. Follow us wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe on the YouTube. Follow us on the social medias. Thank you to Chicago Podcast Studio, to our social media maven, Kaylee. And come back again next time, please. I am Pavi Prochko. And remember, do get fucked.
Yeah. And I'm Colin Funk, and remember, the way to show your love is to send them your heart after you die.
God, that's what I'm gonna do. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Two Grooms, One Plot, a Pavitas Productions project, hosted by Colin Funk and Pavi Prochko. This podcast was produced by Chicago Podcast Studio. Our opening cartoon was created by Gloriu, and our theme song was composed by me, Pavi Prochko. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite listening platform. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at Two Grooms, One Plot for updates on new episodes and behind-the-scenes content. If you have any feedback, comments, concerns, or kudos, you can email us at twogroomsOneplot@gmail.com. Please rate and review us wherever you can. It would help us out a bunch. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you next time.